Welcome into a special edition of the PHNX Sun Devils and PHNX Wildcat Show, where we're getting you ready for Big 12 college football. I am Anthony Totri, joined by the one, the only Eric Ruby. We've got Mr. Mike Luke, and of course, the boss man himself, Saul Bookman. Before we get into Arizona State and the Arizona Wildcats, this is the first year, guys, where Arizona State in a new conference in the Big 12, which the name doesn't honestly mean anything now that it is 16 teams. But overall, what do we think? We're so accustomed to Pac-12 football where it's high-flying offenses, not really a lot of defensive prowess. And now the Big 12 is going to look entirely different to both these schools.
Well, I think it does mean something with the Big 12 because it's representative of 12 states in the Big 12. So there is that.
There you go, Mike.
But yes,
look
I
at
was
the
going to say,
big brain
had
on
that
Brad.
locked and loaded.
Right.
Look at that.
The knowledge. But joking aside, it's going to be fun because you have fan bases that actually care about sports. Like in the Pac-12, you had fan bases that you go to Stanford, you go to Cal, you go to Washington. There's nobody there. Nobody cares. And so that part is really, really cool. And honestly, it's the best basketball conference in the country, and it's underrated football, Saul.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You know, I'm just excited about the different venues. And I think really, honestly, it's going to provide a template for, relatively speaking, for our two fan bases that can be hit or miss from time to time in terms of their enthusiasm and their involvement with the programs. In basketball, obviously, we don't have that issue, but in football, we certainly have. And so when you travel on the road and you go to a West Virginia or you go to a Manhattan, Kansas, or you go to an Ames, Iowa, and you see that they sell out, even though those towns are like 10,000 people in population, like it's going to make you feel some type of way. So I hope it really helps everybody step up.
I think the main thing that I'm excited about is we don't have to talk about conference realignment with these two teams specifically and a TV deal and everything. We can just go and be like, hey, it's a football season. Yeah. Right. And it's new and it's exciting. And I also think that comes into play when you talk about when you go to the future and building, being in different areas, playing in different states, giving different types of visibility. It's overall just a fresh look, and I'm going to miss the Pac-12, but I think if you're going to land anywhere, landing in the Big 12 gives you so much room to kind of make your mark, and I think that's really exciting for both of these schools.
What would you say you're going to miss about the Pac-12?
They were good. Like, they were good teams. Come on.
Pac-12 after dark?
The Conference of Champions.
The last 10 years, the complete buffoonery that has happened in the Pac-12 is
I'm not going to miss
something that I'm just not going to miss.
The higher upside? Absolutely not. That,
mean,
Larry Scott, Kleofka, just all terrible. Not missing any of that at all.
But also the national relevance part of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that's something that I'm very much looking forward to kind of rebounding from, because for the last 10 years, it felt like the West Coast was the Death Coast. So, like, we just didn't exist to the rest of the country. And I thought that it really hurt overall brands.
Well,
and so now we're about to come out of that.
A lot of the Pac-12 felt like it was just tearing itself apart year after year. And I think you even saw that last year when it came to Pac-12 football with so many good teams down the stretch. Washington, Oregon, Arizona on the way up. Utah, it was just a bunch of programs which just started to eat each other alive, which they had done for such a long time, which I think kind of plays into the national relevancy part of it, because you always had teams with 2-3 losses versus you look at the Big Ten champions or the SEC or even the Big 12 in certain years, and those are undefeated teams or one-loss teams. It's going to definitely be interesting, to your point, Eric, about the future of where the Big 12 can go. And I think the thing that I'm looking forward to most is Brett Yormark and just kind of seeing where he can take this entire thing. It's not Larry Scott. It's not George Kleofkoff. Conference realignment will continue to move on. TV rights and all those types of deals will move forward, and you've got somebody at the helm that understands business and can actually try and grow the Big 12 to the same level, or at least in the same ballpark as a Big 10 and the SEC. And look, we're going to continue talking about the Big 12 as a whole. But first, Eric, you and I, we spend countless hours talking about Arizona State, been to practices, talking to players, talking to coaches. Let's go ahead. Let's take a look at what ASU fans can expect from the Sun Devils this season.
College football is back. We are here at Mountain America Stadium. Arizona State football just around the corner. Week 1 against Wyoming. Eric, we've been watching Sun Devil football all the way from spring football to right now, week 1. Just for you, what is maybe the biggest takeaway that you've seen over the last few months for Arizona State?
The evolution of the defense and the chemistry and the overall talent level
there's no doubt in my mind the defensive side is going to be the best side of the football. And that's no disrespect to the offensive side, but when you just watch them and the level of talent that they have and the level of camaraderie they have for a unit that has a lot of moving pieces and moving parts, you could really just tell, especially when they were scrimmaging and everything like that too, they really, really came together and they were loud and they played good and they made big plays. I think this defense is the strongest unit of the ball, like, clearly.
Yeah, and it obviously helps for Arizona State going into the second season of the Kenny Dillingham era, having Brian Ward, your defensive coordinator, return. You bring back some key pieces, CJ Fight along the defensive line. You also have guys in the back end like a Shamari Simmons and Xavier Alford, who were a big part of this team last year as well. But flipping to the offensive side of the ball, a new quarterback at Arizona State, redshirt freshman Sam Levitt. He is the guy beating out Jeff Sims, beating out Trenton Bourguet. What have you seen from him that makes you confident going into this season?
All of the tools to be a really good quarterback. When you're trying to build a quarterback from scratch, you want a little bit of mobility in the pocket. You want somebody who doesn't turn the ball over, and you want somebody with some incredible arm strength. Sam Levitt checks all of those boxes. Now, putting that all together in a way that is more contained and controlled is where you take a step back and say that's where he has room to grow. But like you said, redshirt freshman, it's going to be his first look at playing consistent college football. And there might be a little bit of a growing period for him, but he has all the talent, all the necessary tools in the world to be a really good quarterback in college football, and according to Kenny Dillingham, possibly on Sundays. Got a long way to go to get there, but he has those intangibles and he has those tools. It's just about putting that all together.
Yeah, yes, he is a young guy, but he's got the arm talent, he's got the athleticism, and according to Kenny Dillingham and offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo, he's got that passion for the game, the will to win, and at the end of the day, that's really what you want from a young quarterback who's still trying to figure out the speed of college football. Obviously, this is going to be his first time starting, hopefully, an entire season. So you've got Sam Levitt, obviously a big part of what Arizona State hopes to do. You've got the defense, but ultimately I think the biggest takeaway for the Sun Devils from spring ball to right now is the depth on this team. Kenny Dillingham mentioned in his very first press conference of the season that there were a couple injuries. Prince Dorba's going to be missing some time. You've got offensive lineman Sean Na, running back Raleek Brown. You've got linebacker Tate Romney out. All of these guys likely missing some time this season, but it's okay because you have so much more depth this year at key positions than you do last year, right? Along the offensive line, you saw all of the additions. At that linebacker spot, you've got guys like a Jordan Crook, a Cyrus Fiaseyu, Keyshawn Elliott that were transferring, and then the running back room is loaded as well.
Well, that's where all these transfers come into play. You and I obviously covered every single transfer that happened from last season to this season, and there was a lot. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving parts, and that in itself can be a talking point. But then when you talk about just the pure depth on this roster, and Kenny mentioned it, like you said, in his press conference, especially on that offensive line, he said that they felt like they were reliant on health to be good and successful last season. This season, they're reliant on their depth and their talent, and they can withstand injuries. Now, you never want to have anybody injured, especially somebody who is either in a starting position or fighting for a starting position and will be in that rotation. You never want to lose that. But what sport are we playing here? Yeah, it's football. That's going to happen. And what killed Arizona State last year was once one player went down, you didn't have somebody step up behind them and somebody to go in and actually make an impact. That's completely different this year. It's a testament to the coaching staff. It's a testament to the recruiting above all else and the way Kenny Dillingham builds relationships. And you're starting to see that pay off now in year 2 as you get into year 3, 4, 5, 6, which I know is getting a little bit ahead of myself. There's no reason why that trend shouldn't continue and continue upwards. So the work that this team and this coaching staff put in the offseason will pay dividends this year, whether that's, some shocking 8-win season. I'm not ready to go there, but they will look better, they will look deeper, they will be able to withstand some sort of trials and tribulations way more than they were in year 1. And that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Kickoff is just around the corner here at Mountain America Stadium. Again, just to recap, if you're an ASU fan, you've got a defense, you've got a quarterback, and you've got some depth. Welcome to the 2024 college football season.
Now, look, those are some of our major takeaways as people who cover the program constantly, but I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on the Sun Devils. Obviously, again, moving from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, year 2 of Kenny Dillingham, you're able to return defensive coordinator Brian Ward. Overall, just where do you feel like the perception of this program is at right now?
I think with ASU, I mean, it could only go up from here. I mean, you do have a coach that he's very much invested in the community. He's very much invested in what he wants, in pushing that ASU brand. It's going to be interesting to see though how far he can really take it. Obviously, there's some limitations in place, but I think you finally have somebody though that is a good dude that actually cares about ASU, and I mean that counts for something.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Man, ASU is kind of a conundrum because it's like Kenny has done just about everything the right way, but you have to have the talent and able to really supersede expectations. And I think I don't know what the measurements or the statistics are on this particular thing, but I always feel like when you go through predictions and projections and a team is just constantly not talked about, it's usually that team that ends up surprising a lot of people because at the end of the season, like, man, nobody talked about those guys. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of how I feel about ASU. I feel like nobody's really talking about positively or negatively. Really, it's just a non-factor right now because nobody really knows what to expect from them in the Big 12. So I actually think that they're going to do a little bit better than last year. But can they get to a bowl game? I think that would be a significant victory in year 2 under Kenny Dillingham. I think most projections have them at 3 or 4 wins. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting for me, and Eric, you can speak to this too. The perception of the program just coming from Big 12 Media Day was kind of like you said, Saul. Like, this is a team that, yes, the roster is completely different even than it really was last year, but people are quote unquote sleeping on this team and saying that they think that Arizona State is going to finish dead last among 16 teams in a conference that also features Houston and Cincinnati playing football. So I feel like the entire perception of the program is still kind of based in the nature of what Arizona State was even a few years ago at the tail end of the Herm era. And I'm not sure there's enough people, I don't want to say giving credit to Kenny because he hasn't done a whole lot as a head coach yet, but to what he has done at previous institutions as an offensive coordinator.
I think the most important thing is you have 2 Sunday quarterbacks already, so I think you have to look at that.
We waited how long? How long did we get into the show before that
shocked.
actually happened?
I'm shocked it took this long, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a second. But kind of to what you were saying, and I've said this on the Sun Devil show quite a bit, I don't necessarily blame people for not being super up to date with what's going on over here. And I think for guys like us that are very in tune with what's going on and all the different players they've gotten in, and they're relying on a lot of transfers. They're relying on players who haven't played in a season, on a redshirt freshman quarterback, and a head coach who's in his second year. And I think all of that combined, it leaves a lot of unknown. And I think when you're looking at the Big 12 from a wide perspective, people are not going to think about ASU because, like Saul said, you're going to have to surprise people. And last year, there wasn't a lot of surprises, but the people who aren't in tune with the team don't realize, A, the injury bug and how devastating that was, because Kenny mentioned it in his media availability earlier this week. You always deal with injuries, but he felt like last year you had to be healthy to win. This year, he feels like they have that depth. And that was one of our points in our video, is there's actual depth to this team. And I think that there's going to be a lot of surprises, and it might take a couple of games to get everybody gelled together because of all the different moving pieces and parts. And because, again, your head coach in your second year, he's even admitted that he feels more in tune than he was last year. He's only going to get better. I think all of that combined will lead to surprising people. And even if it doesn't turn directly into wins and losses, I think it's going to come in the form of competitive games. Yeah. And if you look at last season in the Big 12, nobody thought West Virginia was going to be that good at all. Yeah, that's fair. I'm not saying ASU is going to emulate that and have a 9-win season, a bowl win and everything, but I think you can kind of look at that model and say, how do you get the most out of your guys? It's your coaching and it's your scheme. And I think ASU has the chance. And I think what we think is they can excel in that realm.
Yeah, this is definitely a roster that has improved more so than it was even 2 years ago, right? At the tail end of the Herm Edwards era, you look back to the first year of Kenny Dillingham, like a lot of new transfers, guys developed after year 1 at Arizona State. But the Big 12 is not necessarily a giant step down from what the Pac-12 was last year. You're going to have likely the most competitive conference in all of college football. You've got teams like in Arizona, Kansas State, Kansas, Utah. People seem to think Colorado can be something. I have my own thoughts about Colorado.
We'll get to that at the end of the show.
We will unite.
But in terms of just Arizona State this season, testing the Big 12, just what do you think the Sun Devils can do? Because this is a team in Arizona State that does face every single team from the Big 12 that found itself in the AP top 25 preseason poll.
I think when you look at the Big 12 in comparison to what the Pac-12 was last year, you don't have as much top end talent, or with the Oregons and the Washingtons and the USCs, but you have more depth. I think across the board, I think you can make an argument 8 to 10 teams in this conference have a legitimate shot to win the conference title. Like, that's how good this conference is across the board. So when you're talking about an ASU team who basically every single week is going to have to play a team that is in that conversation, that makes for an uphill battle. And I think that's the biggest difference between last year and this year is that, very rarely you're going to find yourself on the road against a sleepy UCLA team.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's happened in the past for both programs. It's not just you guys. So I don't know what to expect, and going into the Big 12, I think my expectations are that ASU is going to be sound as like they were last year. And as much as they had a bad record, to do some of the things that they did without a legitimate quarterback play, it's just ridiculous.
It is.
And so you're hoping that can just marginally improve this year.
Yeah. I mean, Mike, they've got a quarterback now. It may not be Rocco Becht. It may not be
Jaden Rashada.
It might not be a Jaden Rashada, but you do have Sam Levitt at quarterback for Arizona State. Just how much do you think he and the Arizona State offense can test some of these kind of behemoths in the Big 12?
Well, it's going to be interesting because, you lose Elijah Badger, obviously. That's a significant loss. He's your best player. But you do return Scadaboo. I do think the running back depth is pretty good. I like Levitt. I'd like to see some, probably some Wildcat packages, get both quarterbacks.
Wildcat.
Yeah, the Wildcat. But maybe to get both quarterbacks on the field at some point. But I like Melquan Stovall. I like Jordan Tyson. I think that with you look at that, there's, I think they've got some pretty underrated talent there. I just don't know how it really stacks up to the rest of the Big 12. So, they could be better, but I also look at it and I still think that they're pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
To say it, but
pretty bad. What do you think they can be in terms of a test, Eric?
I think that they're going to be nonstop because they have a lot of depth, and maybe they don't have that top-end talent like Elijah Badger, but when you look at the running back room, like Mike mentioned, or even the wide receiver room as well, you have an Xavier Guillory as well, a Troy O'Meary as well. I think that they have a bunch of different looks, and they're going to keep people guessing, and Kenny and Marcus Arroyo as well, I think is a super underrated part in all of this. When you look at last season, not only did they have to overcome hellish injuries on the offensive line, hellish injuries in the quarterback room, they also changed offensive coordinators halfway through the season. Yeah. And there was success after that, but there's something to be said about having a good offensive coordinator to establish a scheme and a system throughout spring and then the summer and then, of course, fall camp as well. They've run with Levitt at the ones the entire time. I know there's the Jeff Sims conversation as well, but Levitt has always been giving the lion's share of the 1 reps. Yeah. You know who your number 1 running back is. You, as of right now, are healthy with that. I think that all of that put together, I'm not saying they're going to go and light the entire conference on fire. I still think the defensive side of the ball, like we mentioned in our video, will be their strongest side.
Yeah.
But I think there's enough to build around to where you're not going to have to play the mix and match guessing game that you did last season. And again, to my previous point about coaching, all of that puts together, I think they're going to shock a lot of people. And I don't think shock in the terms they're going to be the best team in the Big 12. But I think a lot of teams that aren't keeping up with ASU, they're going to be like, who the hell are these guys and how are they actually driving down the field right now? So I think they have the talent for that. They just actually have to get the best out of everybody to get there, but they're in a way better position to do that this season than last.
Yeah, especially offensively. Let's go ahead and get into some Arizona State offensive players, maybe to watch if you're an Arizona State fan, or maybe if you're just a Big 12 fan and don't know a whole lot about Arizona State. We've mentioned Sam Levitt, Mike's favorite player, of course, being Jeff Sims, Cam Scadaboo. For me, I think, though, it's Jordan Tyson. Jordan Tyson obviously had a phenomenal freshman season at Colorado, doing things in special teams at that wide receiver spot. Missed the majority of last year, still recovering from a pretty gruesome knee injury that he suffered at Colorado. But he has been the guy since Elijah Badger entered the transfer portal, went to Florida. It's really been Jordan Tyson's room to command and own, and he's gotten even better in ways that don't necessarily involve him with the ball. Ever since Hines Ward became the wide receivers coach at Arizona State, I think Jordan Tyson has the potential to really elevate not only his play at Arizona State, but eventually his long-term draft stock, which is something that I know he wants to do after college. So I'd say Jordan Tyson for sure is a name to watch.
I'd go in that same unit. I'd go Melquan Stovall. I mean, I think when you look at him, he's a player that if he was a little bit taller, if he's a little bit faster, he'd probably be on some NFL draft boards. But he also feels like the kind of guy that just kind of knows how to get open.
Yeah.
He can sit down in zones. He can kind of get, his hit by the cornerback. I think he's going to have a nice season. I don't think it's going to be like a spectacular year, but I could see him catching, 60 balls for 730 yards, something like that. I think he's a pretty solid player, and I think he's being a little bit overlooked.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like it starts and ends with your quarterback. And I think that's every single game. That's what I'm going to be focusing on is how is Sam Levitt going to perform? Does he make it through the entire season? Do we see any Sims, run? I don't know. Listen, and that's not, trying to be, an ass about it. It's just a fact. Like you had one of the best wide receivers in the country last year in Elijah Badger. And because you didn't have anybody that could really get him the ball, it didn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you got to start. So Sam Levitt's got a lot of pressure on him. He's got to step up. If this team has any aspirations of trying to make it to a bowl game, he's going to have to be the one that's at the head of that snake.
Yeah. Sam Levitt, Melquan Stovall, Jordan Tyson, and
I think it's hard to talk about this and not mention Cam Skattebo.
Yeah.
And I think especially because you are going to see a different Cam Skattebo than you are last year. He slimmed down. He looks very elusive, especially when you're talking like red zone goal line drills. I mean, he's getting in there and he's evading a very strong defensive unit, almost untouched with how fast and elusive he is. But he somehow still kept that bulk to where I feel like he can still run somebody over. They're going to use him in a lot more concentrated of a sense. They're not going to ask him to be a punter and a quarterback. And I think that alone is something that's going to unlock him. But a name that's not, a skill position player, but Leaf Fautanu is possibly the best center of the Big 12, one of the best in the country as well. This offensive line, as much as the quarterback play is going to determine their success, if the quarterback's not getting protected and the running backs don't have room to make a play, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. And so Leaf being the leader of that, the center, literally and figuratively, about that line, I think as long as he stays healthy and in control, everything will come easier. And so I think it's hard to talk about offense without mentioning those two guys specifically.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I think the Arizona State offense still has some big questions that need to be answered with Marcus Arroyo, with Sam Levitt. But if Arizona State's going to win football games this year, it's going to be because of that ASU defense that we talked about a little bit earlier at Mountain America Stadium. Kind of transitioning to that defensive side of the ball, who do you guys think is somebody that has to really go out and have a big season, or just another name to watch for that Sun Devil defense?
Well, it's Keyshawn Elliott. It's not even close. I mean, that's your dude. That's the one that I think is going to really kind of, put his mark on this defense. And I think he's got to be. I think he's not only the best player. I think he's got to be an all Big 12 type performer. Mm-hmm. And I think he's got the talent to be able to do that. Another one too that you and I have texted a lot about is Jacob Kungaika. Shout out Mama Kungaika, by the way. But I think he's a good player. I think that was a loss that Arizona got, and I'm excited to see what he can do.
For me, listen, you guys turned the ball over 20 times last year. We're only able to take the ball away 9 times. Suffered in trying to create turnovers. That secondary really had problems trying to, get the ball. So I'm going to look at Cole Martin. Mm-hmm. I think Cole Martin is going to have a tremendous impact on this team. And really, listen, I think when you have a team that might be going through it from time to time, like last year's squad, you need guys that have that energy. You need guys that are going to, no matter what, they're always looking at the positive side of things and trying to rally everybody. And I think Cole Martin's definitely that guy to be able to try and turn that unit around.
Yeah, that ASU secondary is certainly going to be a big part of what ASU does this season. For me, it's Xavier Alford.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth.
A guy who was going to be a big part of this ASU defense last year, but the NCAA'd. And then he didn't get a play. Obviously, Jake Smith on the offensive side of the ball didn't get a play as well. But Xavier Alford is a guy who is going to be the leader of that ASU defense. He would have been the best player defensively last year. He's the best player defensively this year, regardless of the talent that they have at linebacker. Sorry, Mike. I know you like Keyshawn Elliott, but Xavier Alford is that dude. There's not many Big 12 teams that you can point to this year that have their best player at safety. Xavier Alford is that guy, and he's a big enough safety with enough experience to be able to step up in the box and be a presence in the run game as well. So I'm going to say Xavier Alford.
I think those are all fantastic names. I think just overall depth is something to watch with defense too. But talk about Cyrus Fiaseu is a lightning bolt. He could be somebody that puts pressure on the quarterback. He snagged interceptions as well throughout camp. He was his team MVP over at San Diego State, and he just is somebody who, if he is firing on all cylinders, everybody else that you guys mentioned are going to be able to focus on their jobs and do their best. And I think that one thing I've noticed all throughout camp, especially with this defensive unit, is that I feel like they're all comfortable in their positions, and that's because they can look to the left and the right, and they know that there's talent there. Keyshawn Elliott is a hell of a talent, and Kenny is raved about him, talking about he's maybe the smartest in the room, hardest worker, strongest. It's hard to beat that type of combination. Cole Martin, we all know Cole Martin here, not only just a fantastic personality, a fantastic leader, but somebody who got recruited specifically to play nickel corner, which is a very specific position to get recruited for, and coming from an Oregon, and is just electric when you talk to him, and when he's on the field, he's extremely strong and extremely fast. And then X as well. I mean, talk about somebody who's chomping at the bit. I mean, that's somebody who
Do
really
you want
wants
to just go through the whole roster? Or?
I'm just saying, that's what Cole.
Hey, guy.
I know, but I'm commenting on all the guys that you guys said.
Let me ask you this: who do you think Kenny Dillingham thinks is going to be his best player this year?
Oh,
be careful on this one.
I don't know who he thinks would be his best player. Probably Cam, because he's going to run the ball.
No, on defense.
On defense,
yeah.
I think it's between Keyshawn and X. Personally, I don't know where he would lean, but he's definitely raved about Keyshawn a lot.
I think it'd probably be Keyshawn.
Yeah, I'd go Keyshawn as well.
But it is what it is. Look, we've talked a lot about the depth-specific players on this Arizona State roster, but let's get into what is it going to take for Arizona State to have a good season?
You want the funny answer or the real answer? Yeah,
just the real answer.
Good quarterback play for me. That's where it's going to start and end.
That's fair.
1,000%. Just can't turn the ball over.
Yeah. What about you, Eric?
I mean, we can go with quarterbacks. I think offensive line as well. You got to stop your quarterback from getting injured and give him actual time to grow.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, there's not much you can do about that.
I'll put a number on it. Cam Scattaboo, 1,000 yards. The team has a good season if Scat's able to reach that century mark. Now, they have a bad season if
Jeff Sims is playing.
I mean, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. When you asked, you got the answer.
Gosh. Yeah. They have a bad season if Scattaboo goes down.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, injury bug is always the answer. I'm going to stick. I think offensive line is the key to almost every football team, but especially this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with if the defense can't force turnovers, something that they weren't able to do a whole lot of last season. And if Sam Levitt isn't the guy that Marcus Arroyo and Kenny think he is, then that's going to be a big problem for that ASU defense. But record predictions. We've done the perfect scenarios, the worst case scenarios. How's it going to go?
I'll go 4-8.
4-8? Okay.
I'm going to do a little bit better than that. I'm going to go 5-7. And I think you guys are going to have, listen, I think just about every single game, you guys will be in it in the fourth quarter. Maybe outside of one or two games. But I can see you guys being competitive. Then it's about execution down the stretch. And I think this is a team that has been absent from fourth quarter relevance for a while. So how do they learn that on the fly in order to be able to get the amount of wins that they want to get? I don't know.
Yeah. 4 wins, 5 wins.
My heart says 6. My brain says 5. We're going to go with 5. I agree with Saul. I think they're going to be in a lot more games than people think. And I think that going into next season, people will be like, man, remember Arizona State? They played really hard.
Yeah.
And then next season is where they're really going to take that leap.
Yeah, I've spent a bunch of time in spring and fall saying between 5 and 7 wins is probably where this team falls. I think there is definitely 6 winnable games on the schedule. But you never know. With injuries, obviously moving to a new conference, the road games are gonna mean a lot more, I think, in this conference. So for me, I'm gonna stick at 5 and 7. But I still think that's a win. I still think that's a win of a season in year 2. Still trying to rebuild this roster, still trying to establish a real culture at Arizona State.
I think mostly because, if you win five games, there's not really any super cupcakes on the schedule for you guys. So you feel better about this version of 5 wins than you would have last year.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, 100%. Now, obviously, we've spent a lot of time talking about Arizona State because, Eric, that's our specialty.
That's right.
Mike, Saul, you guys spend obviously a lot of time with the Wildcats around that program. Just what are your overall thoughts, I guess, about that program right now?
Yeah, well, we have some thoughts on that, and we're going to go to that right now.
I'm Mike Luke, joined by the boss, Saul Bookman. Arizona football returns a lot of players on this team, a lot of marquee players, Saul, and that's why expectations are sky high. When you got players like Noah Fifita, when you got players like T-Mac, Jacob Manu, across the board, there's a lot of talent here, and I think that's why people are so excited about this team.
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount of excitement, and we're going to find out game 1 how much excitement people really have about this team because, obviously we're here at Arizona Stadium. They should be able to sell out a game like this because it is the most high-profile opportunity that the Arizona Wildcats have ever had. And when you bring guys back like that, plus Takario Davis, Gunnar Maldonado, Genesis Smith, like the list goes on and on in terms of the talent that this team has. So it's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, and when you look at it too, you got a lot of newcomers on this team, and it starts with the coaching staff. I think with Brent Brennan, with Dino Babers and Dwayne Aquina, but they seem to be all on the same path at this point, and they're all going to be working, and they've got a lot of experience. Obviously, we've got to see it on the field, but I think you feel pretty good about it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, Brent Brennan proved that he's a legitimate coach at the D1 level. He did it at San Jose State with very limited means to be able to recruit, and did it at a high level and got that school to a conference championship. So like, it's just one of these opportunities that Arizona finds itself in a very unique blend of replacing the former and adding to the current.
Right.
And I think they've done a very good job, and you can look all across the board and the types of players that they've added that will prove that.
And when you look at the weaknesses on this team, or I would say more like you got wild cards, but I think there's talent across the board to be able to make this. You look at the defensive line, and obviously you lost a lot of talent off there, but you also return a lot of talent, and you also bring in some players that this group is very excited about. Chuba Maye, Isaiah Johnson coming back, obviously a Trey Smith. And you've got players. It's just going to be interesting to see how this does unfold. A lot of wild cards, Saul.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said wild cards and not really, hindrances to the team, because I think we just don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
When you have this influx of transfer talent and players that might improve from year one to year two, that's the great thing about the defensive side that I will give them, is that they have relative consistency because of Dwayne Aquina staying on staff and really carrying that over. And so, but guys like you mentioned, Chuba May, very high expectations in terms of what they're going to need to produce to hold the fort here in the Big 12. So it's going to be heavy sledding, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
And then I think on the offensive side, when you're looking at wild cards too, again, you got talent. Rayshon Speedy Luke, you got Rhino at left tackle. These are guys that have played really well in camp. It's now time to be able to show it on the field.
Yeah, Keon Burnett is another one that I just think is going to be phenomenal. The tight end position is very much utilized under Brent Brennan. I know Dino Babers has got his eye on that as well. The running game and obviously Krosky Merritt. It's just going to be a mixture of unique things that we hadn't seen last year that we're going to add to this blend this year. And I think you're going to see some tweaks that are going to really surprise a lot of people.
Hype's at a sky-high level right now, and the season's here. Let's get started.
Let's go, buddy.
Let's go. Bear down, back the A.
Hey, all the day.
All right, now we're going to be talking about the Arizona Wildcats, a team that is actually good. But again, here's a couple things that we do need to talk about, is what is the perception of this program around the country, Saul? And I think there's a lot of mixed emotions here. I mean, that you returned a lot of players, but I think a lot of people are saying you got to show me.
Yeah, no, I think that's the biggest thing is like nationally, people still don't really understand what Arizona's all about. And listen, I think the thing that everybody knows is they got two tremendous players, one at quarterback and one at wide receiver, and Noah Fifita and T-Mac. We talked about them at length. But what about the rest of the team? I think Jedd Fisch got a lot of credit for what this program did a year ago. And I think if you polled Arizona fans, I think you get a 50-50 split into how much Jedd Fisch really meant to the program, because you can make an argument that if Jayden de Laura doesn't get hurt, we don't get to the point that we got to last year, because Jedd Fisch was just so persistent in playing Jayden de Laura when clearly, when we looked at Noah Fifita, how amazing he was as he progressed through the year, makes you kind of second guess where you would have been as a program. So a lot to prove, not a lot of promise in terms of the projections from the national people, but I think locally Arizona's in a good spot.
Yeah, I'd say the overall perception of Arizona is, at least in my estimation, pretty similar to what it was for TCU not too long ago after that national championship appearance. Is like, okay, you had a really, really strong season that not a lot of people expected. Like you said, go do it again. And if you can't, then you're just an anomaly last year. And if you can, then maybe you're starting to trend in the right direction.
Yeah, I think you covered it. I think obviously a big part of it is the Jedd Fisch and him leaving. And that was just such a big national story and how that all happened and the fan reaction from it. And it's about Brent Brennan as well. And maybe not specifically national media outlets are talking about him, but keeping that continuity of you have your two best players, nationally recognized players, especially in T-Mac, regarded as one of, if not the best in his position. How do you take that and have the team around them in a year where you're not just following up on a successful season, but you're doing it with a completely different head coach? And I think that nationally, it's right. Like, it's prove it. And I don't think they're disrespected, but I don't think they're like beloved. I think they're kind of just somewhere right in between.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, I mean, Arizona's preseason number 21. I mean, I think they're going to be better than that. But again, you're still getting love. And at the same time, you're top 5. You're predicted to finish 5th in the Big 12, but you got 5 teams that are in the top 25 in the Big 12. So that's something that you got to certainly keep an eye on. Now, when it comes to an offensive player to watch, who are you looking for, Saul Bookman?
Oh, man. I can go in a variety of different ways. Patterson at the wide receiver position is one of them that I just feel like is super electric. But because of the way things have kind of unfolded in camp, I'm going to go with Keon Burnett. Tight end. I think he has the flexibility and the growth really over the course of the last couple seasons to be able to show that he's dynamic in the passing game, but also can hold up in the run game. And I think that's what Brennan is really going to want to focus on a little bit more this season, is really running the ball at a high level.
I think for me, the offensive player that you have to watch is Noah Fifita, right? You talked a little bit when it came to ASU. You had one of the best wide receivers in the nation in Elijah Badger, and it felt like a wasted year because of the quarterback play. Noah Fifita now going up against some really promising Big 12 secondaries, and his name is going to be thrown in the conversation with a lot of really, really good Big 12 quarterbacks. He's going to have to go out there and he's going to have to make the most of having T-Mac at wideout. He's the guy that needs to have a good year.
I think it's hard not to talk about Tedero McMillan, but I know what I'm going to get out of him. I'm more focused on the running back room, considering that you guys lost 3 of your top rushers last season, and projected person to get the most carries, although it's going to be spread out, is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I got that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. New Mexico transfer. And I feel like if you are able to have a solid rushing game alongside Fifita and T-Mac, that opens up so much more, because at the end of the day, if you got one play that you're going to, teams by the end of the season are going to be able to lock in on that. And sure, T-Mac can make a grab over anybody, but if you have a balanced running attack that defenses have to keep in mind, I think that makes their lives as Fifita and T-Mac's so much easier.
Right. And then when you look on the defensive side, you've obviously got a new defensive.
Who's your guy?
What's that?
Who's your guy?
Oh, it's Noah Fifita by a mile. I mean, I don't know that there's a quarterback in the country I'd take over Noah. I think he's that good. And and again,
in
man,
the country.
Yeah. And again, I was telling Saul before the season last year, and Saul poo-pooed me. I said, dude, this Noah Fifita, when he hits the field, he ain't coming off. And you saw it. He's a winner. He's a winner. He can make plays. He is I think he's a truly special player, and we're going to find out. We're going to find out. Time will tell, as they say. Now, when it comes to the defensive side, you got Dwayne Aquina, new defensive coordinator, said he wants to be more aggressive than last year. Saul, who's a player that you're looking for on the defensive side?
It's going to have to be Chuba May. Like, it's Chuba, transferring from UC Davis and getting on that front defensive line. He's going to have to hold up against some pretty solid rushing attacks in the Big 12. We've named multiple running backs. So, obviously we talked about Scatterboo, and we're going to talk about, Ollie Gordon and all those guys, right? But I just think that the defensive line for Arizona can make or break the entire season, in my opinion. So I'm going to go with Chuba.
I hate to keep it with the star players, but it's got to be Tacario Davis on the defense side of the ball. This is an absolutely loaded, just overall college football class of defensive backs. And you look even specifically in the Big 12, I mean, at Kansas and the Arizona State secondary, Kansas State secondary, and then, I mean, you've got Tacario Davis, a guy who is a projected first-round defensive back.
I'm going to say, one of my boldest predictions is Tacario Davis will prove that he's the best corner in the entire country this season.
If he does, I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of what we're going to talk about, but Arizona has a really good season if Tacario Davis is that good.
Yeah, I think Jacob Manu is always somebody to watch on the defensive end, but if you want to go maybe less of a known name, San Jose State transfer Trey Smith as well, who led the team in sacks last year, coming over with Brennan. I think that's going to be nice for Brennan and for him to have some familiarity there as well. And if he's able to, I mean, you're not going to be able to replicate that type of production considering the type of talent difference between playing at a San Jose State and now playing in the Big 12. But he's able to emulate some of it along with all the players that you guys mentioned. That's going to help Arizona's defense a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Jacob Manu is the best player on the defensive side of the football for Arizona. I know Tacario Davis gets all the love, deservedly so. Jacob Manu is a person, if you ask any coach off record, they'll say he's far and away the best defensive player on the team, and he's one of the 3 best players on this entire roster. You look at his stats, you look at, sacks, tackles, etc. He's the dude. Everything goes off of him. And so that's going to be, hopefully an all-American season out of him. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
But then, Saul, Arizona has a really good season if what happens?
Arizona has a really good season if Noah Fifita can throw for 4,500 yards, which I think is doable. I think he's going to set insane records this year because I think the talent around him will dictate that.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, 4,500 yards for a college quarterback would be a ton. For me, I think Arizona has a good season if T-Mac stays healthy. If T-Mac plays in all 12 games for the Wildcats, it's going to be tough, whoever's opposite of him, to really shut down a guy of that size, that caliber, a future NFL wide receiver, likely a first-round pick. So if he stays healthy, that's all really it would take for Arizona having a decent season in my mind. Not
to cop out again, but quarterback is definitely the thing to look at. But if Noah Fifita is by far and away the best quarterback in college football, my expectations for what this Arizona team would be completely different. If you sold for 4,500 yards as a Heisman, then we're talking a different type of team.
I'm just saying, Noah Fifita could very, realistically have a Joe Burrow type of season.
Not if Shadur has anything to say about that.
Oh gosh.
Right. And yeah, when it comes to the offensive side, for me, it's Big Rhino at left tackle. I mean, you got a lot of talent on the offensive line, but Arizona's got a first-round pick of Jonas Avenea that they didn't move over to left tackle. They feel pretty good about him at left tackle. We're going to find that one out. So now Arizona has a disappointing season, Saul.
I mean, injuries are always the cop-out right here when you're talking about that. But honestly, I would say if they just don't show that they have the chemistry that maybe they had a season ago under Brennan, if things are just a little discombobulated, feels like guys are not really in the positions that they should be, I think that could be the major factor in terms of why they wouldn't be as a successful team as they were a year ago.
Not that I think it's going to happen, but if Noah does have a sophomore slump, then this team, I think, is in for it, and not just this season. I think if Arizona has a bad season in general, it's going to be bad long-term for Brent Brennan as the coach. So a lot of pressure on Noah, and if he does have a little bit of a down year, then it's easily going to be a tough season for Arizona.
Yeah, I'm not trying to copy you, but I said this on our show like a week ago when we went through every Big 12 team's fatal flaw. It is if Brent Brennan can't carry over the momentum from last season.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard right now to be like, okay, San Jose State, I know Arizona fans are like, oh, but look at what he did there. But if you look at the record, you look at the school he's coming from, it's easy from a national perspective to poo-poo on that.
Yeah.
And if you start off not hitting the type of expectations that Arizona fans are placing on this team, even if they're not, let's say, top 5, top 10 in the country, but still high expectations, the perception locally of Brent Brennan is going to shift, whether it's fair or not. And so I think getting off to a slow start is going to start a lot of questions being asked, and it's hard to stop that snowball from turning into a big one if it just goes off the rails at the beginning, right? So I think if Brent Brennan can't carry that momentum over, and it's not just on him, but he's going to get the blame if that doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, listen, there's not many programs in the country that can boast saying that they have 3 potential first-round NFL draft picks, and certainly not Arizona. And so that's the potential that you're playing with. And if you falter, it's going to make you look bad no matter what. So
right, exactly. So we'll find out. It's going to be an interesting season for Arizona for sure. And there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of, you got to win. We've talked about this all, and that's what it's going to come down to. And I think the big thing for me is if they can't handle the pressure that's on them, because you're not gonna have another T-Mac the following season. You're gonna have a lot of guys that are gonna be going to the NFL. And if they can't handle that pressure, then then it's gonna be a disappointing season, and we're almost kind of back to square one.
So do you have any predictions then for how this whole season plays out?
Yeah, I think Arizona's gonna win the Big 12. I think they're gonna go. I think Arizona's gonna go 10-2. I think they're gonna win the Big 12.
Wow, that's 10-2.
10-2 is pretty good.
10-2
is very good. Let's say you, Saul Bookman.
No, I'll let these guys go.
I'm going to
first.
go 8 wins. I think you're going to have a couple close losses that are going to be pretty devastating. And I think that, again, like the Big 12, we're talking about 5 ranked teams in the Big 12. It's a lot of good competition. I think that there's still a chance that you're ranked and highly regarded with 8 wins, but I still think that it's not going to be as good as 10 wins and clearly winning the Big 12. I don't see that.
Yeah, I'm going to order the Brent Brennan special and just get a 7-5 going. I think that's funny. Brent Brennan's. Just if you look at what he's done historically, 7-5 is just kind of what I have to go at until you can prove that you can actually win games at a high level in a much more competitive conference. Again, Noah Fifita, T-Mac, Tacario Davis, all some really, really talented players. But if you don't have coaching behind it, then it's not going to mean a whole lot. And I think Brent Brennan has to prove something this year.
Listen, they have 3 really, really tough road games: Kansas State, Utah, and then at Central Florida. Outside of that, I think Arizona was kind of got lucky this year in terms of the strength of schedule and how everything played out. They got some pretty road tough games like West Virginia. They're coming to Tucson, so they don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So with that being said, I think that they're going to be able to win early, and I think they're going to impress a lot of people, and that's going to vault them in the polls, and they're going to have a successful year. And I think I agree with Mike. I think 10-2 is definitely there, but I think 10-2 is only there if they can pull off 1 or 2 of the wins against Kansas State and Utah. If they go 0-2 against those 2, then I'm 8-4 is definitely right there at the end of the road for sure. But I think 10-2, and that's honestly, I think that's a casual prediction, to be honest with you. I'm looking at the resume and I'm in the schedule, and I'm like, I don't know if I can see 4 or 5 losses, and that's where I kind of go.
Well, we're going to have definitely our eyes on both Arizona and Arizona State all season long. But we started this whole thing off talking about joining the Big 12. So let's actually get into the conference as a whole. And I want to start on just a team-by-team basis, not necessarily individual players. So for you guys, who do you feel like is the team to watch in this conference, not named Arizona or Arizona State?
Man, everybody wants to pick Utah. Because that's like I feel like that's just the easy way out for a lot of teams. And I'm not trying to come with an inherent bias because I did go to K-State for a year, but K-State's, to me, they've been they're as solid a program as Utah has been. They just haven't gotten that high profile game yet. And they won the Big 12 conference championship the year TCU went to the CFP, and that was great. I think they have a solid program. Chris Kleiman's done a great job. I think Kansas State is the team that I'm going to be keeping an eye on.
I agree with that. I'd go Kansas State as well. I think that when you move on from somebody like Will Howard, you're not doing that lightly. I think they built a really good structure there. You return a lot of players on the line. I like Kansas State.
I have to get my answer in before Eric takes it. I'm going to go ahead and go Iowa State. Iowa State.
He knows me. He knows.
With Rocco Becht,
Come on,
is, in my estimation, one of the best quarterbacks in this conference. I think he's slept on, and they're returning a ton of guys offensively and defensively. This wasn't a terrible team last year. Rocco Becht is, again, I think he's going to be better than Brock Purdy when it's all said and done at Iowa State. That's the team to watch.
Oklahoma State is also a really easy answer. You probably have the best player, and we'll get into that in a second, in Ollie Gordon. In the Big 12, they have a lot of other returning talent on offense. Their wide receivers are not shabby at all, and you have the 15th-year quarterback in Alan Bowman as well. So I think that,
but he's kind of
I don't think he's great, but I think everything around him is good enough that he's not going to be making massive amount of mistakes. And also, Ollie Gordon will be touching the ball 1,000 times a game, and if he gets in trouble again, it's going to be 2,000 times a game because he has a coach who said your punishment is running the ball more. So I think that that's a really interesting team to watch just for offense alone. I think UCF is in that conversation too.
I absolutely agree with UCF.
Yeah, I think they're going to be pretty fun to watch.
Just in terms of Oklahoma State, they have a good year if you keep the car keys away from both Gundy and Ollie Gordon. Just leave that at that.
Ride shares.
Do we have a surprise team to watch in this conference?
Well, kind of what he just alluded to. I think UCF could surprise everybody, not only in the conference but in the country.
Yeah,
I think they just, from top to bottom, I think they're really athletic. I think they're going to be able to show that Gus Malzahn is going to rebound from some of the slip ups he's had in recent coaching years and really prove that he's got not only a phenomenal quarterback that just transferred over from Arkansas and KJ Jefferson. Sorry, I was like, wait, KJ Jefferson, who holds just about every single significant Arkansas passing record possible. But also their wide receivers are phenomenal. They've got such great talent and depth at the wide receiver position that you kind of feel like, man, maybe this is all going to line up. I could see the November game, November 2nd, Arizona at UCF being one of the most pivotal games in the conference this season, easily.
What do you got, Mike?
I go Iowa State. I like Iowa State. I like Rocco Becht. I like the job Matt Campbell's done there. It seems like every other year he has a good year, then he has a bad year, then he has a good year. This would be a good year for him. And again, when you got a quarterback that can make plays like he can, I mean, Rocco Beck was one of the handful of best freshman quarterbacks in the country. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, I'm going to go Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech doesn't get a lot of love, but they've got one of the best running backs in the conference, which is saying a lot about Big 12 running backs. But Taj Brooks, and then you've got Jalen Conyers obviously transferring over from Arizona State to Texas Tech. Overall, I think they have enough weapons offensively to have a better season than people expect. I don't think Texas Tech is a team that's going to go out there and maybe win a Big 12 title game, but this is a team, I think, as it all starts to come together, you could be looking in mid-November being like, this team is 7-8 wins, and nobody's really talking about them. But in terms of teams that maybe might have a down year, teams with high expectations that are just going to fall flat on their face, Eric, I'll start with you. Who is in for a letdown in 2024?
Am I allowed to give my underrated team to watch first?
Do whatever you want.
I was wondering. I was like, wait, did he even give one?
I just want to say, and this is maybe fitting, nobody's talking about West Virginia, and I guess we're going to continue that trend. So that's that. No,
that's
fair. Team that might be a little bit disappointing. I think Kansas is setting themselves up for a make or break year, especially with Jalen Daniels' health. Yeah. If he goes down, there's a lot of other question marks on that team, and I personally am high on them at this moment, but I can easily see how things can kind of go off the rails for them. I think they're kind of not the sweethearts of the Big 12, but a lot of people are looking at Kansas like, wow, what an incredible story. Look at the program they've built. Jalen Daniels gets injured, and they get off to this rocky start of the season. I think perception is going to change about Kansas pretty quickly. So I think they're kind of setting themselves up as one of those top 5 teams in the Big 12 that easily could drop out of that with just 1 or 2 things happening.
Yeah, that's fair. What do you think, Mike?
As far as disappointment goes, well, I mean, I guess I can't really talk about him too much but Colorado, I don't see it. With Colorado, I think this is a house of cards. I think the second that things go wrong, if they lose that game in Nebraska, I think you're going to start seeing fingers being pointed at each other. And I'll just leave it at that.
I really want to take Colorado.
I do too.
I really do because I do feel like, listen, as an Arizona fan, there's been a lot of hype locally for us, right? But I also feel like, at least from the perspective of stability with Brent Brennan, listen, he could have lost everybody from that roster last year, but he held it all together somehow, some way, lost a few key players, but nothing, tremendously, detrimental. When you're looking at Prime and how it just feels like that program is something's always going on there, positive or negative, it just feels like it's a constant influx of drama.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's too much. And I do feel like that is a house of cards that could fall. But I, by God, am going to go with West Virginia because I am so tired of everybody talking about, West Virginia is going to be the sleeper. Listen, they got lucky last year. They won some really, really close games that could have went the other way.
Yeah.
Garrett Green is an overrated quarterback. His passing completion percentage is only like 52 last year, and somehow they were able to thrive despite him. Okay, and he's getting a lot of love as one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. Cool. Good luck with that 4-8 record when you fall on your face and you're not going to be as good as everybody thinks you are. So I hope everybody in the Mountaineer State sees this.
I didn't expect the heat for West Virginia from Saul.
Ray Anderson's cheering in his seat right now.
I know.
Yes,
he's gonna be at that game.
He's somewhere.
Oh, no, he ain't.
Somewhere teaching a class at ASU, doing that. He's just like, yes, Saul is on my side.
He's like a spider.
I got you, Ray.
For me, it's gonna be Kansas State. You obviously have a quarterback in Avery Johnson who I think is talented, but I think there is a world where maybe it was just not a lucky game, but it was not enough tape in my estimation of Avery Johnson. You've obviously got a new offensive coordinator there, so I don't know if it's all going to come together for me, though. I think there are a lot of people, Saul included, that think Kansas State is going to be better than I do. I think they're in for a letdown, but Avery Johnson, a really talented quarterback. We'll see if it translates for him being the starter. We've talked a lot about quarterbacks on this show. Noah Fifita, the wide receiver position. You obviously have Brennan Presley over at Oklahoma State. Defensively, there are guys across this conference. Let's pick one. Who is the player of the year when it's all said and done in the Big 12?
Noah Fifita.
Man, he is just not backing down.
No. Man, he'd know Jaden Rashada, but
I mean, he's saying best player in college football.
Right. He is. What do you got, Saul?
Oh man, player of the year, man. I do want to go with Noah because I think he's going to get a lot of love because of what he's going to do on the field. But let's just take the Arizona inherent bias for me out. If there was one player that I think has the potential to be the player of the year outside of Arizona, I would say Avery Johnson.
Okay.
Because I think Kansas State's going to be that good. I think Kansas State and Arizona will end up facing each other in the Big 12 championship. That's my prediction. So that's why I think Avery Johnson. Listen, I watched Avery Johnson down the stretch of last season. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's a great passer, and he's only getting better. I'm a big believer in Avery Johnson.
What do you got, Rubus?
I don't want to overthink this. It's Ollie Gordon.
Yeah.
He's going to get the most touches out of any skill position player in this entire conference. They're going to run absolutely everything through him, and he's immensely talented. He's really, really good. He'll be a Heisman candidate. He'll be the best player in the Big 12. And I'm honestly, I'm pretty confident about that.
You think he's going to be a Heisman candidate even if they only win 7 games?
I think they're going to win more than 7 games.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think they're probably looking like 8. I mean, not like 10 wins, but I think 8 or 9 wins for Oklahoma State.
Okay.
I just think that offense.
He's going to have numbers you can't ignore.
I think that's just a really big part of it. Even if they are 7 wins, I'm not going to say he's going to win the Heisman because maybe the wins play into that, but everything is going to go through him, bar none. And so to me, that's the easy answer, and that's the answer that I'm sticking with.
I think a lot of people talk about Kansas as a team and Jalen Daniels, he's got to stay healthy. But if he stays healthy, I think for me, he is going to be the best player in this conference. I think he's got NFL size. I think he is a really, really athletic quarterback. And if he is able to stay healthy again, there's enough talent on that team for them to make a really, really good run. And if Kansas has a really good run, it's going to be thanks to Jalen Daniels. So he's my pick for Big 12 Player of the Year. In terms of conference champion and who could be in this new 12-team college football playoff, we talked earlier about this conference being the most competitive. Do you guys think most competitive is going to translate in most teams in the college football playoff? Who's winning it and who's getting in?
No. Not a chance. I love the Big 12, but there's not a chance. The top end talent just isn't there like it is in other leagues. I think Arizona's going to win it, though. How about that?
I see, and I kind of agree. I think in order for 2 teams to get in from the Big 12, both teams that play in the conference championship have to have no more than 2 losses.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's going to happen, though.
Yeah,
I can easily see both teams being 9-3. No. Playing in that conference championship game, and the loser's out.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a competitive conference. Obviously, I'm steering towards Arizona just because I think they have more top end talent than everybody else in the conference, in my opinion. But if I had to say like somebody else, I would definitely probably go K-State.
What do you think, Eric?
Don't always say this, but I love the boring answer here.
Yeah.
Utah.
Yeah.
And I know that we mentioned earlier, it's like, oh, well, not sure, especially with Cam Rising and his injury and everything. They're just such a well-oiled machine. I mean, the preseason.
They're so well-oiled that they got blasted by 30-plus points last year by Arizona, but that's cool.
Listen, different years, man. Shit happens. Listen, you want to focus on the past, man? That's fine. I'm going to focus on the future. Okay, I just think that they're the safest, they're the easiest pick, and I truly think that they are going to be, at the end of the day, the best team in the Big 12. At least when you get to that championship game, that anything can happen. But I would put my money on Utah. I don't think that the Big 12 have the most teams in the college football playoffs.
Yeah.
I think that's easily the SEC, and then I think the Big 10 is there in second, and the Big 12 is coming in third. However, I think there are talented enough teams to where, like Saul said, if they separate themselves from the rest in this conference, they give themselves as good a shot of any. But I think that's less likely than those other 2 conferences.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. It's the boring answer, but what Utah does and what Kyle Whittingham has built over 2 decades with the Utes has been incredible
His
to watch.
swan song.
And it's coming to an end here pretty soon for Kyle Whittingham. So I'm not saying they send him off with a national championship, but they definitely send him off, in my estimation, with a Big 12 title. But that is going to do it for a special edition of the PHNX Sun Devils and PHNX Wildcat Show. Make sure you guys hit the like button, drop a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast, and make sure you are subscribed to PHNX Sports on YouTube. And for all of your Arizona State content, make sure you follow PHNX_Sun Devils. And for all things Wildcats, make sure you follow the PHNX Wildcat Show. Guys, college football is back.
We all silly like the mayor.